All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Batting 1,000, where we have the heavy hitters in the mortgage industry. And this is going to be an incredible conversation because we have today Diego Sanchez, who is the president of HousingWire. Diego is a digital media veteran, been around a long time doing this in executive management, host of the 10-Minute Talks on LinkedIn. If you haven't seen those, you should check those out. He's also a former senior leader at TravelZoo, Rodale, and Adtelligent. So he's got a ton of experience in this industry. Comes with a bachelor's of art in governmental studies from Harvard. Wow. Okay. And also a MBA from Columbia Business School. Lives in Brooklyn with his wife and his two kids. And Diego, I also am going to add, I consider you a good friend. And that's my favorite part about having you. You and I had a chance to hang out together over dinner at the HousingWire Gathering event, which was just an incredible event. If you haven't signed up for the Gathering for 2025, do it because you'll want to be there. That was a great event. And we want to open up by talking a little bit about your IMB Summit that's coming up. So Diego, welcome. We're glad to have you here. Talk to us about what's happening in HousingWire right now and what you're doing with this IMB Summit come up. You just came off the AI Summit. There's just a whole lot that's happening. I'd love to hear some of the highlights that came out of those things and what you're planning coming up in October.
Well, Dale, first of all, I just really appreciate you having me on your show. What an honor for me. I always enjoy catching up with you, and I also consider you a good friend. Enjoyed chatting with you and your better half at the gathering. That was really fun. Really felt like we got to know each other over the course of that dinner. So HousingWire is busy. You know, the news in mortgage and in housing overall has not slowed down at all in the 6 years that I've been with the company. It's sort of big news event after big news event for the past 6 years. So the summer continues to be busy for HousingWire. We did just launch a new live event concept, which we're pretty excited about. We call them one-day summits. Our first one-day summit was on artificial intelligence, and we sold out the George Bush Presidential Center auditorium for that event, which was really fun. It's a really neat venue where you get to see, some of the history of that administration and our country. Actually, some of the artwork that George Bush has done is hanging up in the hallways. And it's just a really, really conducive environment for executive networking and learning. And so all the feedback that we got from that event has been very positive. And we want to keep going with this concept of bringing the industry together for one-day events around topics that are really resonating right now. So when we came out of the gathering, everyone was talking in sessions and in the hallways about artificial intelligence. So that was our first one-day summit. Made a lot of sense. Yep. I think another big topic at the gathering was, what are independent mortgage banks going to do in this higher for longer mortgage rate environment? Yep. How are they going to survive and even thrive? And so that's the second one-day summit. We're calling it the IMB Summit, but it's going to be focused on, how people can win in this still somewhat difficult environment. So the IMB Summit will be October 1st, back in Dallas at the George Bush Presidential Center. Would really love to have you and Jake and all the members of your audience join us there.
Awesome. So let's talk about that for just a minute. What do you see? You see everything. As president of HousingWire, you've been doing this for 6 months. I know that you've grown extensively in your role, but you've been there for a long time. And I know that you see everything. You, like me, talk to executives every single day who run mortgage companies. You see what's happening out in the marketplace. Talk from your perspective. What are you seeing the trends to be in the marketplace, and what are lenders doing to succeed in this marketplace, most importantly?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think there are a couple of key things that I see in my conversations and in our coverage of the winners in this environment.
Yep.
And one of those is keeping a really close eye on costs. The cost to originate a mortgage, and this is no secret. The MBA puts out their study every quarter. It got up as high as 13,500 on
Yep.
average per
Unbelievable.
mortgage, which is insane, right?
Yep.
I think it's come back a little bit, to mid 11s, but still, when you think about margin compression and being in a difficult environment where the volume is not what it used to be, keeping a really close eye on costs and understanding your cost structure and the technologies that can potentially help you improve that cost structure is super important. I'll probably butcher this a little bit, but the CEO of Freedom Mortgage at the gathering, just his whole session was about, hey, you got to make more money per loan than it costs you, right? Like it sounds very simple, but a lot of lenders aren't there,
Right.
And so that's a really really big one. I think another really big one is, despite how difficult the environment is, there are a lot of owners and executive teams that want to grow and are winning market share either organically
Yep.
and or through M&A. And so it's been really interesting to see the makeup of these organizations that are continuing to win in this difficult environment. And so like taking a look at what they do and understanding how they're doing what they're doing seems like a really good recipe for success. And then the third thing is, there's like two key data points in the housing market from my perspective.
Okay.
One is mortgage rates,
Right.
and the other is inventory of homes available for sale.
Yep.
And there are a lot of data providers out there and media companies that look at that data on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis. Home price indexes that include inventory can sometimes be up a month or two stale. It's really important to attach yourself to a media company or a research company that is a little bit more timely with that data, because it moves so quickly
Yep.
and so frequently that if you're looking at data that is a month stale or 2 months stale, that's not going to help you maneuver your business through a still difficult environment. And so timeliness of the data and analysis of the data, I think, is really important to managing a business.
So let's talk about that a little bit more for just a minute, because you said some really important things there. You talked first about cost. I've always been a believer. I consult to executives across the nation on how to succeed, and we've got clients that are crushing it. And I'm curious to hear from you if you're seeing the same thing I'm seeing. What I'm seeing in this marketplace for the last 2.5 years now is haves and have-nots and nothing in between.
Yeah.
Either companies are absolutely slaying this market and they're happy where the rates are at. They're happy with what's going on. They're making a lot of money and they're closing a lot of loans, or they're just dying on the vine and trying to figure out how to survive. And those companies are the ones that latch on right away to that cost cutting idea. Well, that's the way to profitability, but there's two sides of profitability. There's cost cutting on one side and there's conversion on the other side.
Yeah.
You've got to cut, but you've got to convert at the same time. And I think that's where the game is most highly accomplished that I'm seeing with my clients in the marketplace, is the ones who understand that we're out of a volume market that we were in 2020 and 2021. We've been in a conversion market for 2.5 years. if you're going to succeed, you got to start by cost cutting. But the thing you can't cut are the essentials that will allow you to convert more of your transactions into funded loans. So tell me, based on that analogy, where do you see, from your perspective, do you see this haves and have nots disparity? And
Oh,
with
oh
the
yeah.
haves, what are they doing to convert better?
I think that there's been a real flight to quality in
Yep.
the housing ecosystem over the last 2 years since we saw things slow down.
Yep.
During the pandemic housing boom, you didn't have to do much to get business, right? The business was kind of raining on all the advisors, whether you're a real estate advisor or mortgage advisor. Um, but in a more difficult market, you really see who the good loan officers are and who the good real estate agents are. And it feels like consumers are gravitating towards those folks who are, the 90-10 LOs, right?
Right.
The 10% of LOs that are doing 90% of the business. And it's even more dramatic on the real estate side, the 5% of real estate agents that are doing 95% of the
Right.
business. And so I think that the organizations that are able to retain, well, first of all, attract and recruit and then retain those winners
Yep.
are the ones that I think are able to move the needle and win market share. Because even though the housing market definitely took a pretty deep dive from the boom, there's still going to be 4 million or so homes sold every year. And so there's still business for a strong core of loan officers and real estate agents. I think that the winners are winning more business in this environment. They're able to show their value. They're able to be strong advisors, and they're able to work with borrowers and potential borrowers who maybe have more unique or difficult situations. I think the winners are winning.
Yep. I love it's fun for me to hear you in your position as the president of HousingWire. Really is a company that really provides the best data and information and publications out there today to keep people informed. And yet, what you're talking about as the key to success is really built around the relationship, the value prop, the customer experience, how they're treating customers. Just saw a report that came out from Lending Tree where they did a study of tens of thousands of consumers who closed loans, and over half of those, 53 or 54%, work with the first lender they talked to, which was so interesting.
Yeah.
And what that tells you is that consumers, when rates are up, are more concerned about somebody explaining to them, why should I buy in this market, or why should I refinance in this market, or why should I use my equity in this market, than my rate's 0.25% less than somebody else. Where I'm seeing the disparity in the industry today is the companies that are still focused on being very transactional are failing miserably, and the ones that are very relational are succeeding greatly. That's to me where the divide happens. And you mentioned it a moment ago, you talked about being an advisor. The companies who are winning, they have an advisor mentality. They're built on a great customer experience. They look at providing their customers with loan officers that really know how to build that strong relationship, provide that great value proposition. So it all ties into what success is within this industry today. It's about really treating that customer differently than you did in 2020 and 2021, where you could be transactional and get away with it, but you can't today. So let's talk for a little bit about the importance of information, because that's where you guys are so powerful. I couldn't do my job if I didn't have access to HousingWire and all of the data and all of the articles and all of the information that you guys provide on a regular basis. Talk about the importance from your perspective of lenders and loan officers alike, all the way down to the originator level, the importance of having the right data, the right information, understanding the marketplace, and then what do you do with that when you get it? How do you respond? Talk about that from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it gets back to what we just talked about. It's really hard to be a good advisor if you don't know what's going on in the market,
Right.
what's going on with the data, yeah, and specifically your local market. So, being a good advisor just really requires you to be smart on what it is you work on. And if you're a loan officer, you work in the housing market. And so, what's happening with inventory in the markets that you cover, what's happening with home prices, what's happening with rates. Even though we can't control rates, you need to know what's happening with them,
Right.
and having a good feel for where they're heading, so that you can give that really good advice to your client, and also like knowing your products. That in a more difficult market. It's not just conforming loans that are going to win you business, right? You've got to know about non-QM. You've got to know about home equity, right? Like you've got a bunch of clients who are sitting on a pretty nice gains from those home price gains over the past decade,
Yep.
and so you've got to know home equity, so knowing your products, knowing the data, and knowing what's happening more broadly in the news that will impact the housing market is really important too. So, like right now, we're in the middle of an election season, and it might be a very different housing market under the different candidates that we've got. So understanding how things might change is super important. Are we going to be getting into more of a refinance situation again because rates have come down so much recently?
Yep.
It's really good to understand all of that stuff again, so you can provide that really good advice to your clients. And if you give that good advice, that's where your business comes from in the future. Not only from them when they do another transaction down the road, whether that's refinance or buy a new house. But those referrals are golden.
Yep.
If you give somebody a good experience, most people, get a referral in terms of mortgage, get a referral from their real estate agent or from their family, right?
Right.
So if you're giving someone a good experience based on that information that that's going to be a winner for you.
I love that. I just interviewed a couple months ago. Had a loan officer on that has been a client, works for a client of mine for many years, closing 60 loans a month in this marketplace. 60
Wow.
loans a month, and he made the statement. I said, "So what's the number one key to success?" And he echoed what you just said. He said, "You got to be the smartest person in the transaction. That's all there is to it. You've got to be the person that understands the market, understands your products, understands the process, understands every aspect of it. And you've got to be more articulate in that than anybody else you're going to talk to. And they're not going to care about your rates at that point. Because when rates are in the sixes and sevens, a quarter
Right.
percent doesn't move the needle for a borrower. What moves the needle is who's the most knowledgeable person that can give me the best advice when I work through. So let me ask you this question, because we're talking about the importance of having access to information and data about the market so you can be that good advisor. But what I tend to see happens a lot is that can also lead to this negative thing called analysis paralysis, where we've got originators that all they do is they live by what rates are doing, and as a result, when rates go up, their attitude drops. They're not positive with their customers, and they're given many times wrong advice. When rates go down, all of a sudden they get excited and it changes, and they get caught up in the information where it actually can become detrimental to them. I know with the companies that I train every single month, we train thousands of loan officers across the nation and dozens of mortgage companies every single month. I'm always making sure that I'm pulling out of the headlines, what are the things you really need to know to help you succeed in this marketplace? And those are things like, where's inventory heading? Very, very important. Where's affordability at? How do you improve that? You know, not what are rates, because rates are what they are, but how do you best take advantage of the rates so you get the lowest payment you can? Talk from your perspective. How do you see lenders working through, and what's your advice to get the right information, but don't get caught up in that trap of letting it become a negative force, but keep it as a positive force?
Yeah, I mean it's tough because there is a lot of noise.
There is.
There's a lot of noise. And so I think it comes down to finding a couple of resources and information sources that you trust
Yep.
and that aren't are consistently not doing clickbait headlines. They're consistently really giving you an understanding and a good analysis of where things are heading. And they're as unbiased as possible. And just bringing you the information and helping you understand it. So I think it's because there are so many sources of information out there,
Yep.
um, and a lot of them are candidly inaccurate about the housing market,
Yep.
especially when you look at media companies that don't do housing media for a living. They kind of dip into housing every once in a while. I'm thinking of the really big mainstream news outlets. They're really good at bringing general news and information about what's happening in the world. But sometimes when they try to dip into housing and give you a perspective on housing, it's wrong. Like,
Yep.
it is not accurate.
Yep.
And so I think it's really important to, you want to know what's going on in the world. But if you want to know what's going on in housing, find a couple of trusted sources that bring it to you in a way that is not clickbaity, that is not sensational, and that is fact based, and that gives you good analysis.
I think you
So I think that's really
just,
important.
I think you just defined HousingWire.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what we try to do. I mean,
You do.
again, I've been at the company for 6 years.
Yep.
When I joined, the newsroom was already incredible. I think the company already had a really good reputation in mortgage. But what we've done over the past 6 years is we've broadened the lens. So we're still very smart on mortgage. We still track mortgage very closely, but we're looking at the entire housing ecosystem now. And I think that's important because, and we should talk about this a little bit, what's happening in real estate with the commission lawsuits and the NAR settlements, what's happening in appraisal, with there not being enough appraisers, and what's happening in title. All these things impact
Yep.
the loan officer and lenders so much that you can't stay in a silo when it comes to
Yep.
the housing market. You've got to understand what's happening, with your real estate partners and your title partners and your appraisal partners.
Yep. And I love how you guys deliver the information. I love the Housing Wire member digest, how it's broken down and really simplified for people that don't understand the raw data. You and I deal in that all the time. So we can look at the raw data and pull out what we need to know and go forward. But for the average originator or even manager for that matter, a lot of times they don't know how to do that. You guys disseminate that information properly so that people really understand it. So let's talk about those three things you just mentioned, because that was actually three of the things I wanted to discuss with you based on what I've seen come out. Let's start with the NAR settlement. Where do you see that at? Where do you see that going? August 17th is right around the corner. So let's talk about that for just a minute.
It's a new world.
It
It's
is.
it's a new normal, and there are going to be a lot of impacts that loan officers and lending executives need to be aware of, because there might be a lot fewer buyers agents out there.
Yep.
And what's the number one source of business and referrals for a lot of LOs? It's the buyer's agent.
That's right.
So just like we're seeing a flight to quality on the mortgage side, that's happening in real estate, but it's almost like on turbo,
Yep.
because um, you don't have to, as a listing agent and as a seller, you no longer have to list buyer's agent compensation in your listing on the MLS,
Right.
and you no longer have to offer it.
Right.
And so what that means, a lot of times when you buy a house, um, you're not paying your agent, you're not paying your buyer's agent
That's right.
out of pocket. It's actually coming from the seller.
Right.
So the seller is paying a commission to their listing agent, and that listing agent in the past was splitting that commission with the buyer's agent. And so a lot of that is going to go away, and there will still be commission splits and sharing. It's just going to be a whole different ball game in terms of how that's communicated. And there are going to be a lot of listing agents, especially if we're in a buyer's market, who say, I don't really need to give much buyer's agent compensation
Right.
because it's hot. Like, I'm going to get a lot of offers no matter what. So I'm going to keep more of this commission. And so what that means is there are going to be a lot of buyer's agents who are trying to figure out how they're going to make their money, make their commissions. And so you may see models where they're charging by the hour. You may see buyer's agent commissions go down fairly significantly,
Yep.
and that will push out a certain number of buyer's agents who can no longer cut it, who can no longer make a living off of commissions. And so understanding that dynamic and thinking about where your referral partnerships should be, you want to pick those buyer's agents who are the winners and who are going to keep doing business.
Yep.
Maybe you want to get more close to listing agents,
Yep.
because listing agents might be making those mortgage referrals. Maybe you want to figure out a way to get to that lead yourself, that home buying lead yourself.
Yep.
And maybe you share that with a real estate agent. Maybe you hire a real estate agent onto your team. You've got a buyer's agent on your team. I
Yep.
think there's all sorts of ways that people can look at what's happening with commissions from those lawsuits and the settlement. But it is going to be changing, and it's going to be changing quickly. Like you said, the 17th is when this is finalized, and these changes have to be in effect. But there are some states and regions that are doing it earlier.
Right.
There are several MLSs that have already removed buyer's agent compensation from listings. And so the changes are going to be fast and furious. And it will be really, really important to be tied to an information source that is tracking this very closely, and what the different real estate brokerages are doing, what team leaders are doing, what individual agents are doing on the buyer and the selling side, and how that is impacting the referral partnerships that are the lifeblood of loan origination. So yeah, it's going to be really important over the next 3 to 6 months to stay close to this story. And again, that trusted information source, a couple of those information sources, you want to be understanding, what's happening with these commission lawsuits and the settlement.
Yeah. I think the one thing that we can certainly agree on, and we know is already going to happen, is the low producing real estate agents on the buyer side will be out of the market. It's just going to be the ones that really were doing a lot of business that listing agents will want to continue to have relationship with and work out. And there's a lot of dual agency or dual relationship happening now, where the listing agents are going to take the buyer side and the listing side both. So it becomes dual representation on that, which isn't great for the consumer, because you really don't have anybody then who's protecting you on the offer side, because it's in the best interest of the listing agent to sell it, but they also represent the buy.
Right.
So
Dale, if I were to
concerns in this whole thing.
Dale, if I were to guess on that dual agency situation, that could be an area that the Department of Justice goes after next.
I would think so.
Because if you just said it, like, if you just think about it logically, both sides cannot be adequately represented
Right.
if one person is representing
That's
both
right.
sides. One of the sides is getting the shaft in that
Right.
in that
Right.
situation,
Yep.
and so I don't think that is going to be an outcome of all the stuff that has happened, and I think it's an unfortunate outcome. And
Yep.
my guess is there will be more litigation in that area, so that really both sides should have a trusted advisor.
They should.
And so we have to figure out a way to properly compensate the buyer's agent, because they do a lot of work.
Yep.
It's a tough job, and the good ones really save their clients a lot of money,
Yep.
negotiate well for their clients, and if it's a first time home buyer, I mean, it is such a complicated transaction.
Yep.
They do a lot of work to simplify a very complicated transaction for that first time home buyer. So I don't think they go away, but we've talked about this already, and to your point, I think there are going to be a lot fewer of them.
Yep. Well, and what we're teaching our clients, and I'm teaching originators across the country, is this is also very opportunistic for a loan originator, because if you are incredibly knowledgeable on the process and you can educate the borrower where the real estate agent used to do that function, you become that much more valuable to the borrower in the process, and less chance you're going to go to your competition. So that becomes the opportunity. All right, let's close out by talking about the other two things, the appraisal problem and the title issue that you were talking about that we're seeing in the marketplace. Talk about that for a few minutes.
Yeah. So we really noticed this during the pandemic boom, when there were just a lot of logistical issues that came up in the valuation process.
Yep.
And there weren't enough appraisers, and there aren't enough appraisers. It is an industry that, for a number of reasons, has most of the workers approaching retirement age,
Yep.
and will likely retire in the next decade. And so we already had an issue that we saw during the last boom. And housing is a cyclical business, so there will be another boom. There hasn't been anything that's been done to really fix the problem of there not being enough appraisers.
Right.
And so maybe it's technology, and we've got to integrate AVMs more, automated valuation models
Yep.
more into the process. Maybe when you look at more standard type properties, you have to do less when it comes to getting a fully licensed appraiser involved, and maybe like that's a way to skip some of the logistical hurdles. But there's still an issue there, and it's not one that can be fully fixed by technology. I think that industry is going to have to figure out how they integrate trainees and new blood more
Yep.
quickly.
Yep.
It is very difficult to become an appraiser, and there's a whole apprenticeship model that doesn't really make a lot of economic sense for the people who are going to be training, like
Right.
the fully licensed appraisers. So there's just a lot of complication that will need to be solved before the next housing boom that will come in the next couple of years. So hopefully that will happen, and maybe we integrate more use of AVMs. And then with title, I think the issue there that's pretty interesting is, do you need title, or do you need the full title process when you're doing things like a refinance?
Right.
On a property where the title was fully established in the original transaction.
Right.
Are there ways that you could reduce some fees there? The title industry also has some competition from attorney opinion letters and other title alternatives. So, could those bring the costs down of title, going forward? So just a couple of issues going on there that I think will have a significant impact on the transaction.
Well, because the cost of the transactions just becomes so high now, and in an
Yep.
affordability tough market, the consumers need every break they can get.
If you can find it. I think another area that we didn't touch on, that I think is really relevant to your audience is what the servicers are doing. We shouldn't sleep on the servicers,
Yep.
because they are, the big ones like Mr. Cooper, New Res, PennyMac. They are amassing gigantic servicing books,
Yep.
and they are building. And we discovered this at our AI summit, and we talked a lot about it because we had CEOs of these different servicers giving talks and presentations at the AI summit. They're building technology to originate from that servicing book. And so when you think about like the opportunity that's going to be out there to originate, the services are going to be taking a bite at that apple.
Yep.
And so when you think about retention and how am I going to stay in touch with my borrowers, with my customers, it's really important to do that, and to do that in a way that adds value,
Yep.
because those servicers are going to be making a lot of offers
Yep. That's
to
right.
your clients.
Right.
And so just being aware of the businesses that they're building,
Yep.
and aware of their intention to do massive origination from those servicing books. It's just another competitor that you got to be aware of
Yep.
as you think about your business plan for the next couple of years.
Yeah, and it can't just be a technological touch. It's got to be a human touch, is what really
Got to be
needs to
human.
happen. Yep.
Yep.
Absolutely. So, final question: where do you see, from your perspective, the industry going in the next 2 to 5 years?
Well, I think it's actually going to be a fairly positive story.
I agree.
I think that this has been a rough couple of years, and it's been rough for lenders. It's been rough for real estate companies. It's been difficult at HousingWire.
Yep.
We're not immune to the challenges of the housing market, but it feels like a number of, when you look at the data, there are a number of very, very positive signs. So one, inventory is creeping back up to a more healthy place. It has been very unhealthily low for a number of years. Even during this difficult market, there was just no good inventory out there.
Yep.
And so, we've been looking at this over the past couple of months, and it is definitely going up. And there are several states where there's more inventory than there was back in 2019 when we had a more balanced market.
Yep.
And so I think inventory is a very positive story. I think mortgage rates, I mean, you never know what's going to happen with mortgage rates,
Right.
but it seems like there are a couple of dynamics that should lead to lower mortgage rates in the coming years.
Yep.
One is, it does seem like the Fed has successfully, beaten down inflation, and there is a decent chance that they are going to come in for the soft landing with our economy, which would be amazing. I don't know if they've ever done that before, so we'll see if it actually happens. But that would be really great. And the spreads between treasuries and mortgage rates, which are a signal on like volatility and how comfortable people are with mortgages in the housing market. Those spreads have really narrowed over the past 6 to 12 months, and it seems like they will continue to narrow. Now, again, something could happen that throws the world into chaos, and then all bets are off. But it looks like the spreads will continue to narrow. So, that second data point of mortgage rates seem to be coming down. And then home prices, which have, it's been great for homeowners because they've just been going up and up and up because of that lack of inventory. those seem to have plateaued.
Yep.
And if we update our Altos research data every week, and it really does seem uh, like we're hitting that sort of flat line
Yep.
in home prices. And if you look at the percentage of home listers who are dropping their prices, that is creeping up, and that's a signal that those home prices will either stay flat or maybe even decline a little bit,
Yep.
which I think would be a very positive story because they've gone up probably too much
They have. They have. No question.
in terms of affordability for first time home buyers. It's been a lot of home price increase. So if you look at all those data points, it's a really positive story. Um, and then if we can in fact have a relatively soft landing in the economy, we still have this great demographic patch of millennials and then Gen Z who need to buy a home, who are creating families,
Yeah.
creating households, and need to buy a home. So I think it's going to be a good couple of years, and then you add on to that like there are millions and millions of people who have gotten mortgages with rates in the sevens. And if you get rates that dial back into the mid to high fives like they could in 2025, or maybe they even go a little bit below that, that's a pretty big refinance
It is.
opportunity.
It is. Yep.
And then you tack on the home equity opportunity because all these people have had such incredible gains and people want to age in place. So, they got to do repairs on their home. And there's a lot of dynamics that lead to home equity potentially being an area that will boom, and reverse mortgages.
Right.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity in the next 2 to 5 years. And I'm personally pretty excited about it.
Me too. You and I are on the same boat. I think literally this is right now one of the most opportunistic markets we've seen in a decade. When you look at the amount of equity that consumers have to work with to build wealth and pay off debt, the amount of debt that's out there today that needs to be eliminated. People are paying 28% when they could pay that off at 6.5%. Doesn't
Right.
seem so bad anymore when you do that. And these are things that can really create opportunities. And the purchase market just gets better and better and better every day. Inventory has been going the right direction. Logan Matashami, who is the analyst for you guys, that dear friend, one of the greatest analysts in the country when it comes to providing information, is constantly talking about the inventory improvements, and that's been a really good sign that we've seen. So I'm as excited as you are. Well, let's close out. Thank you so much, first off, for being on here, Diego. You are just such a light in the industry and so much knowledge. Talk to us about what people should be doing. What are the lenders watching this, the executives watching this, and even the loan officers watching this? What should they be doing from an information standpoint to reach out to HousingWire? What are the conferences they should be attending? What are the things you guys are doing that lenders and originators should be involved in right now?
Yeah, I've got a couple of recommendations. So one, I think our editor in chief, Sarah Wheeler, has by far the best podcast in housing with
Awesome.
HousingWire Daily.
Yep.
That is a really excellent way to stay in touch with everything that HousingWire has going on. So
Yep.
Logan goes on that show twice a week. James Kleiman, the managing editor of our newsroom, goes on once or twice a week. Mike Simonson, the president of Altos Research, which we acquired last year,
Yep.
goes on regularly. It is such a great show for keeping your finger on the pulse of what's going on in housing.
Yep.
So sticking with Mike Simonson and Logan Motashami just for a second, they are two of the best forecasters
Yep.
in housing and analysts in housing. And they both do weekly work and research and analysis that I think is pretty helpful to stay in touch with. So Logan does the weekly tracker, which you can just find on HousingWire, and it goes out in all of our newsletters. And Mike Simonson actually on the Altos Research YouTube channel does this really great weekly 10-minute video
Yep.
where he just breaks down this is what's happening in the housing market, gives
Yep.
all the data, inventory, home prices. And it's a really great way to keep track of housing market data on a weekly basis. And then I have to mention again, especially for your audience, our upcoming IMB Summit.
Yep.
The agenda is being put together by Sarah Wheeler, our editor in chief. She's amazing at putting together content.
Yep.
And bringing the best speakers in the industry together to deliver that content. So October 1st, back in Dallas. And again, you can find a link to the IMB Summit website on housingwire.com. I think those are the big things that will help. The podcast, keeping in touch with what Logan and Mike are thinking about and writing about, and then the IMB Summit.
Well, and access to the HousingWire information every day. I mean, being a HousingWire member, HousingWire Plus member is even better. So you get access to all of the information. That would be my recommendation to everybody in the mortgage industry. So you guys do an incredible job with the information and have such a great team. Clayton and Leslie and yourself and Logan and Sarah, it's just the dream team. It's really what it comes down to.
We do have a lot of fun, and I think that the people who come to our events can see it in person.
Yep.
Like we actually like to hang out with each other,
Yep.
and we like to hang out with the industry and learn together, network together, and have a good time together. So appreciate that feedback. I love the team. I think it's a great team. It's the team that Clayton and I have built over the past 6 years, and it's just been a great journey.
Awesome. Well, I can tell you, after 30 years of doing conferences, I've done hundreds and hundreds of them. That gathering conference that you guys had in Scottsdale was unbelievable. It was a great networking conference. It was great information. It was timely. It was short pieces, so you didn't have people talking to you for an hour and a half, and can't keep attention. It was really done as good as any conference I've ever seen. Kudos to you guys.
Appreciate that. Yeah, as executives, we think about how we like to experience conferences, and unfortunately, how short our my attention span is at times.
Yep.
And there's nothing that you can say in 30 minutes that you can't say in 15 minutes.
That's right.
And it's going to be way more punchy.
That's right.
And people are going to remember it a lot more if you deliver it in 15 minutes, right?
Agreed.
Because if it's 30 minutes, you're kind of looking at your phone, you're talking to the person next to you.
Yep.
You lose the focus. And so we do try to keep the sessions to 15 to 25 minutes. 25 minutes is max, right? That's like a really interesting panel or something.
Yep.
Just the key, again, the key to conferences is like, can I just take away a handful of nuggets
Yep.
That I can integrate back into my business?
Yep.
And so when you keep those sessions punchy, it makes it easier to deliver those nuggets.
Well, Diego, great conversation. Thank you again for your time and for your willingness to do this. So appreciate your friendship and your partnership with HousingWire. Thanks for what you guys do for the industry. We could not be who we are without you guys. So we want to thank you for that. And I look forward to the next time I get to see you, which will probably be in October. And Dallas is, in October, it's not 150 degrees there. So it's a nice time to be in Dallas.
It might actually be a really good time to be in Dallas.
Yep.
So I really look forward to that as well, and hope you have a great rest of your summer.
You too, Diego. Thanks so much. So that wraps up another Batting 1,000, where we interview the industry's heavy hitters. Today, again, we had Diego Sanchez. Great conversation, great interview. We'll look forward to seeing you guys on the next one. Until then, God bless. Have a great rest of your month. Thanks, everybody.